Some brands offer you low finance, or cashback, or servicing.
Renault don't do ors. We do ands. The Renault Kadjar with 1.91% APR and €1,000 cashback and 3 years servicing, saving you thousands. Renault, the brand with the ands. Visit your local Renault dealer. Finance is made under a hire purchase agreement. Terms and conditions apply. Deposit required. Subject to lending criteria. See Renault.ie.
Hey, this is James Arnold Taylor, voice actor, the voice of Yabba Dabba Doo, Fred Flintstone,
Johnny Test, who's 11 years old and totally awesome,
Ratchet from Ratchet and Clank, Tidus from Final Fantasy X, oh yes, and of course, Obi-Wan Kenobi. It wouldn't be Coffee with Kenobi without yours truly. The force is strong here indeed. Previously on Coffee with Kenobi.
3PO, he's comic relief, but he's also sometimes he's the voice of reason, and he can kind of get drowned out in all the activity sometimes. But like when you've rewatched the movie 100 times, it's like when they're going through the asteroid field, for example, and Han's like, we need to get closer to one of the big ones, and you just hear 3PO in the background. He's like, closer, and we might get pulverized if we stay out here much longer. Pulverized, he's like this, cyborg or this android Greek chorus or something. I don't know. I just love him.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
That was one fun conversation. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. This is show number 144. We are your spoiler-free place for Star Wars discussion, analysis, rhetoric, and the best travel tips this side of the galaxy. I'm your host, Dan Z, drinking One Nation coffee out of a copper Solo mug from the ILM crew that worked on the standalone film. This is a perfect time to do it because Solo is out, and we are experiencing kind of a resurgence and the joy of this film and all that it brings. On Coffee with Kenobi, I invite you to join me as we think about the mythology of Star Wars in a whole new way and maybe laugh a little bit in the process. You are here with your Star Wars family as we go to our favorite coffee shop and talk some Star Wars. On today's show, Scott Murray and Aaron Adams join us as we continue looking at the original trilogy. This time, the top 5 things we love about Return of the Jedi. We lost a legend this week with the passing of Gary Kurtz, and Tom's going to join us in the new segment to reflect on Kurtz's legacy. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi. Joining us today for a cup of coffee is first the host and producer of the Geek Supreme and Comic Book Noob podcast, and he's also the writer-producer of the fiction podcast, The Crimson Files. Please welcome back Scott Murray.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be back with you. Good to be back with you, Dan.
Yes, you. And now that I think about this, hearing the dulcet tones of your voice, we did a Return of the Jedi show in the first year of Coffee with Kenobi, didn't we?
Yeah, we've done one, but it never gets old to talk about it.
No, and this will be a much different approach as we've been listening and doing the past couple of shows. It's just the top 5 things that we love about this particular movie we're going to talk about. But before we jump into that, I would also love to welcome our next guest. He's a first-time member of the Coffee with Kenobi family, but a long-time person in the world of podcasting and a huge Star Wars fan. He's the audio producer and the co-host of Marvelous Disney Podcast on the Gem Hill Media Network. Welcome, Aaron Adams.
Hi, everybody. I am thrilled to be here tonight.
Oh, man, we are thrilled to have you. And this is a great show for a lot of reasons because the two of you are on, and the two of you have some of the best voices in podcasting, so it's going to be fun just to listen to just for that alone.
I'm afraid that I might accidentally geek out and just start talking audio stuff, so I'm going to try to keep all the shop stuff off to the side so we don't have to edit any of that out. But we'll talk later after the show about audio stuff.
Perfect. Yeah, and you don't have to worry about the overdone broadcast diction on this end.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for having me on today.
This became kind of a Simpsons episode. I love it. So let's talk Return of the Jedi. This is, as I said, we've been going through the films in chronological order as far as release goes, and we're doing Return of the Jedi today. And this is, again, just like the other shows we've done. It's not necessarily in order 1 to 5, 5 to 1. It's just whatever comes to mind or whenever you made the list. It can be scenes, moments, characters, feelings, memories, collectibles. It really doesn't matter. We're just talking Return of the Jedi, and that is always a good thing. Scott, why don't you kick it off for us? What is the first one you have on your list?
So we're going from 5 to 1?
Or 1 to 5, or 3, then 2, then 7.
Randomly, however you feel.
However you feel moved by the Force. Okay.
Well, then in that case, I'm going to start with number 5. And for me, it's just Jabba's palace. Just because, you know, I anytime you have a story like this that's broken up, you know, there's I think it's important to open it in a way that grabs your attention. So in Empire, of course, we had the ice planet, and then what are these things that are hitting the ground, and these Imperial probe droids, and you see the Tauntauns. You're immediately dropped into this new world. But, you know, here we go. You know, we keep hearing about Jabba, and this is before, you know, we saw the superimposed Jabba in A New Hope. Mm-hmm. This was back then our first chance to see him, but just everything about it, you know, the mysteriousness of it, the danger that's really around every corner of that place and under your feet. You know, you look at that and you think you would definitely want to be on his good side and not his bad side, stuck in one of those dungeons or what have you. You know, of course, the Rancor. And it was, you know, it really led up to a great opening scene just because there was just so much danger and mysteriousness and peril surrounding that place. And you know, you got Luke Skywalker going in there, and even Jabba's not afraid of him. So I think Jabba's palace, you know, there's so many things we remember about it. And I never get tired of seeing that opening scene all the way through. And I like the original Max Rebo band song before they changed it. Oh, I'm a big fan of that.
Yep. We don't speak of the other song on the show.
Okay, good.
In fact, I'll have to edit this out. Thanks, Scott.
Oh, sorry. I'll just say the Max Rebo band song, and we all know what it means. So yeah, I just think that was, you know, we'd all been to Tatooine already. So really what they gave us, or what George gave us, was just, you know, the world was inside of that palace. And that was really quite the place to spend your first few minutes of that third film.
Yeah. You know, and one of the things that I always love about that scene, just that whole part, the first third of the film, just feels expansive. It feels very like a real place. It feels very breathable, the way that they did it in the set design. And that's a wonderful way to kick it off.
Yeah, and I love it when C-3PO walks up to the door and knocks and immediately says, well, it doesn't look like anybody's here. Let's go.
Yeah. As an audio nerd, I have the book of sound effects for Star Wars, and the sound effect for Boba Fett walking has spurs jangling when he takes steps, which is funny because Boba Fett does not have spurs if you look closely at his costume, but if you listen very closely when he takes those steps, you can hear the little jangly because they wanted to have a Western feel to him, like he's the baddest cowboy. So they threw spurs into the sound effect, which it's kind of odd, but makes it cool somehow.
The ambiance. That's a good call. Yeah. That's a good call.
Yeah.
Aaron, what do you have for your first one?
Luke's green lightsaber being introduced. You know, we had blue and red for the first two movies, and then obviously at the end of Empire, Luke loses his hand as well as his saber. And when the green one first lit up in the movie theater, it was so vibrant in its color. And the blue one seemed to be kind of white with a blue halo. And it was when the green one lit up when I went, holy cow, look at that. Yeah. And boy, did I fall in love with the color of it and the way the handle was different from the previous one and everything about it. So I actually ended up having a replica of that made. And I love it dearly. Actually, if I could, is this where I would give a shout out to thank the maker?
Yeah, you bet. You bet.
I want to thank Jeremy Jackson of CloudCitySabers.com who made that for me. It was a little bit on the normally it's kind of pricey, but he did a favor for my wife for my birthday as a gift, and it is spectacular. It opens up, has a kyber crystal in it that glows when you turn the thing on. It is so darn cool. It is immaculate. But yeah, thanks to the maker, Jeremy Jackson at Cloud City Sabers.
Well, that That's pretty cool, and people listening can't see this on our recording, but that you have a picture of you holding that thing. It looks amazing.
Actually, I've got a lot of photos of it that I would posted on my Facebook page. So if you want, I can send you those images if you want to, post them online. And it is immaculate. It's beautiful, and it just makes me happy every time I turn it on. I get yay, like a little kid.
So I feel particularly similarly giddy because I actually am going to get to say this before Scott, but it's only because I'm going to say it in a different way than Scott will, and that's the beauty of this conversation. Anyway, but my number one is the scene. It's the scene Luke comes out, he salutes R2-D2, you hear that Williams music, and then we've got the flip, the catch, boom, green lightsaber, that energy. I think what I love the most about that, besides actually getting to see Luke cut loose for the first time, in the late 70s, early 80s, was that soundtrack, because I had the record, of course, as I'm sure we all did, and I played that song over and over and over, and I jumped off my bed and grabbed the end of the bed, and in my mind I was flipping and catching my then yellow lightsaber that I got from Kenner or Target or KB Toys or wherever I got it from at the time. It was just pure magic to me, and it just felt like Luke could do anything, and we were all going to be safe because Luke.
I got to ask you a question about your lightsaber. Was it the hollow one that when you waved it, when the wind would go through it, it'd make the whoom sound?
That was mine.
That was one of the few lightsabers I never had, actually.
Really? Okay.
I had the balloon one, the one that you had to blow up, the very original one that they had.
And it had like a flashlight base in the handle. Yep.
And it was yellow.
We all had the same toys. It's awesome.
Oh, yeah. We're probably very similar in age.
Yeah, I had the Han Solo blaster, too, that when you fired it, it sounded like a really bad moped instead of what it sounded like on film.
Yeah, because there was a plastic gear spinning against a plastic plate inside the handle. You had to hold the second trigger on the handle to make it actually make contact. Yeah, I had that one too. Yep.
So good. Yeah, that scene in the Return of the Jedi storybook they sold, it has the image of Luke on the front holding the green lightsaber, and of course we know now that it was green because it showed up better in the background of the daylight when they filmed that. But we didn't know about that or care. We'd seen that Luke made and constructed a new lightsaber, and I mean that's almost perfect.
Different color. Yeah, it was because nobody expected it. It was like you only had blue and red. Blue was good, red was bad, and that was the formula. And then all of a sudden green, and you're like, what? It was something so simple. And another example of when a challenge gives you artistic liberties. It was filming against a blue sky. It wouldn't stand out very well. And they're like, make it green. Mm-hmm. And it was just a simple decision that affected the course of those movies forever, because now Mace Windu's got a purple lightsaber and you got yellow ones. And I can't wait to see a black lightsaber on screen in live action.
Oh, boy. Well, that would be interesting to see if they go back into that section of the timeline.
They teased it in Rogue One.
Yes, they did.
Okay, I'm off topic. Back to Return of the Jedi.
No worries. I saw the host was shaking his finger, so I guess we're going to go back to our second one. Aaron, that is to you. Oh, no, Scott, you started off, didn't you?
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Number 4 for me is just the second assault on the second Death Star, or I guess the second assault, the assault on the second Death Star.
Sure.
Just because the magnitude of the fight, you have Admiral Akbar and his infamous trap line. We see Lando and all of his greatness. There was so much controversy surrounding Lando's decisions in Empire, and we see him do so many great things early on to help Luke and Han and Chewie get out of Jabba's palace. But then we see really what he's made of as a pilot, flying the Millennium Falcon, which is one of the reasons why we were excited for Solo, to see some of that in his early life. So there's that. And just, that I just remember as a kid really being on the edge of my seat going into that third film, because I was wondering, how are they going to win? How is everybody, how are they going to pull this off? How are they going to actually give the Empire a really big defeat here? So, and we'd already seen the first battle, the first Death Star battle, and it was enough to blow it up and go home. And that's all they were looking to do at that point in time. So it was really something to see that battle take a whole next level. And of course, the added challenge of having the shield generator down on the moon's surface. But when everything starts to fall apart for the Empire, It's really something, especially when it looked like for a while there they had the upper hand because the Emperor set it all up, and then it was the Death Star was operational, and then next thing you know, the tide turns, Star Destroyers are crashing, things are blowing up, and kamikaze pilots are right. Guys, A-wings running into Star Destroyers, and of course Lando going in there with Wedge in classic fashion to blow the thing up and speeding out of there at the last minute. So I mean, and again, the music along with all of that was just great. Even the lead up to that assault on the Death Star had some great music to it.
It really did. And there's something still, even to this day. And I just showed in this, and we're going to hear from my son later in the show, because I just showed my 5-year-old Return of the Jedi for the first time. In that sequence that you're talking about, Scott, where they're showing the view from the Falcon's perspective. Mm-hmm. And there just seems like waves and waves and waves of TIE fighters crashing, basically right towards us as an audience. It still gives you that effect of, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that. Aaron, what's your second one?
I didn't want to pick just like favorite scenes and whatnot because it's all good. I can't really choose among, it's like a Sophie's choice. I can't pick amongst my children. It's all good. So I went kind of more generalized. Number 4 for me is the sound design. As an audio guy, my entire life, the reason I am in sound is because for 2 parts. One is Ben Burt is part 1. And because I got to experience all of the wonderful sound design in Star Wars, the only other thing that was missing was I was a Spider-Man fan and I wanted to know what Thwip sounded like in real life. And so I had to wait until either they made that movie or I made that sound myself as a sound person. So I am crazy about the sounds of Star Wars. Like I said earlier, I've got the book about the sound design, and the way that Ben would get like a speeder passing by is he would just make a highway, but he would take a vacuum cleaner, an extension, that long tube, and he would put the microphone in that, and it would give it this hollow type sound as a vehicle would pass by. And it was just a really simple thing. I'm sure everyone knows that he would, ding a high tension wire, and that's where the blaster sound effects come from, and waving a microphone in front of a broken TV monitor, that is where the hum comes from the lightsaber and all that. But the way that he was capturing sound in this really organic way, but creating what we would consider very digital or future sounds with old analog archaic hammer and high tension wire was just mind-blowing to me when I discovered who Ben Burt was and what he did. So for me, number 4, because it's just got to be in there somewhere, is the entire sound of the universe of Star Wars. And they really didn't even add much to the catalog of sounds that they use in Return of the Jedi. A blaster still sounds like a blaster. A lightsaber still sounds like a lightsaber. Millennium Falcon has its own sound. So, there's a lot of stuff that had been used over and over and over again that are now trademark Star Wars sounds. So they really didn't add a lot to it. It's just that I am so in love with the sound, I got to put it on my list.
That was one of the ones I had for when we had our show on show 142 about A New Hope. Just the sound and the clicks and all of that. Yeah, that's great. My next one is nothing to do with the actual film itself, more the film going experience. And that for me was standing in that line the day Return of the Jedi came out. And we took the day off of school. Like my mom called us into school so we could see it the first day, which I never dreamed was even something that she would have considered.
Oops, excuse me. That was me. Sorry.
That's okay. I know. That's how I felt too. I fell over too.
Well, that was K2SO that just fell over.
Oh, no.
Oh, man. I hope it was not the main one. You know how there's like a few.
No, it's the gigantic plastic one.
Oh, my goodness. Well, that sensation of knowing that I was going to see it, it was the first day. And they had already sold out the very, very first showing, even though we got there very, very early. So I was disappointed in that, but I remember my mom saying, it's okay. We're going to see the second showing. That's still really early. That's still really cool. No one's going to ruin it for you. Because, of course, even then, as a young man, I didn't like spoilers. So we waited in line, and there were a bunch of cars driving by because, of course, it was a spectacle. People had their folding chairs out, and we were waiting around the block. And I remember a vehicle driving by and rolling. It was like a younger couple. They were probably in high school now that I think about it. And the guy yelled out the window, "Hey, space cadets," and everybody laughed. And I remember thinking, why is that funny? And my mom said, "Oh, they're trying to tease us because they think we think we're from space or something. That's why they call us space cadets." And now as an adult, I still don't think it's funny.
No.
But you know, the spirit was there and it was fun. It's just that anticipation of the first viewing. And then we actually got in the theater. I remember walking across, because it was right by a mall, and they had a bunch of magazines of Return of the Jedi. So I bought them and I just looked at the cover, but I wouldn't open it because I didn't really want to see the images until I went to the theater. I was nuts about that stuff even then. So when we actually started watching the movie, every time a new character would appear, everybody in the theater clapped. When Jabba first made his appearance on screen, everybody clapped. You know, the ending, you know, when it happens with Vader, everyone clapped. It was like being at a sporting event, but I was watching Star Wars. And I'm pretty convinced that particular showing is the reason I like going to see movies in a movie theater. I mean, I've got this 70-some inch TV. I've got 8 speakers downstairs, subwoofer. I've got this incredible surround sound system in my house. It's just everything I ever dreamed. But still, 2 weeks ago, I went and saw Smokey and the Bandit at the local theater because I just like that experience of seeing a movie in the theater. And I think it's because of how everyone reacted seeing Return of the Jedi.
It's awesome. Yeah. I also enjoy the theater experience, but I also saw a lot of movies in Detroit, and the Detroit audience is vocal.
Oh, really? That doesn't surprise me.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was on 8 Mile, so, you know.
Oh, there you go.
It was Detroit. So.
Were you? So here's the deal breaker. Were you a Pistons fan?
Actually, the beauty for me is I have never cared about sports in my entire life.
So
I've loved movies and comic books and other nerdery stuff, but I've never been inclined to run, is where I think I'm going with this.
Right. Good enough. Well, I'm a Bulls fan, so that's good stuff. All right, so let's go ahead and take a break. This is super fun already. I can't wait to see what Scott and Aaron have for the rest of their list. Let's take our first break, and when we come back, we will continue talking about the top 5 things we love about Return of the Jedi. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Coffee with Kenobi. Oh, pass the cream, would you?
In what is rapidly becoming one of my favorite portions of Coffee with Kenobi, I get to share with you the CWK pour over clip from this week. This week we tackled our top 5 favorite animated shows of all time, and this is a pretty hilarious clip where Tom talks about something from growing up that I think all of us can relate to, and it's that pivotal time where you kind of transition from childhood to adolescence, and I mean getting close to becoming a teenager. And there's a bit of a shift there for some of us, and here is the clip for this week where Tom's going to share more of that.
Ooh.
That song, yeah.
Was it on a mixtape?
It is a mixed CD. It's got the Batman on it. It's got Spider-Man.
Oh, gotcha. Nice. Nice.
Okay. Yeah, cool.
So, yeah. All right, Tom. That's great.
All right. Yeah, I'm kind of with Corey. I'm not sure that I can rank mine, and I don't have a 5th. But let me see. I'm going to go with the one that I don't know. I'm just going to toss this one out there. He-Man. I loved watching He-Man, and you know, of course, that was in the age when I was really into D&D as a kid, and so when He-Man came out, it just played right into my zone, and you know, I remember thinking I think it might have been the first time when, as a kid, I don't know when those came out, early 80s probably.
It was
I hope it's not late.
83.
Okay, yeah. So I was just an emerging teen, I guess. And I was really picking up on the campy side of it and kind of appreciating that. But I'll never forget.
You loved Orko.
Orko? Wait a minute.
You don't remember Orko? Are you kidding? The little red
little like wizard or
face, and
that was my biggest beef with 80s cartoons, is that they always had to have some little like something little like that. I hated those things. Like in Scooby-Doo of the 80s, you had Scrappy-Doo. Why did they have to do that?
We need our dog.
Careful. Dan Scrappy-Doo. Crappy-Doo. Anyway.
My brother used to call him Orko, by the way, because of Orko. Thanks.
Yeah. All those stupid little characters they thought they had to throw in there. Anyway, my He-Man story is this. I was having a birthday party, and it was the first time I had invited girls to a birthday party. So this is 12, 13 years old.
Hello.
And I was so I was getting all these like more, the teen type of gifts, like records. Sorry, there's my age. There's my age, Corey. Okay, so I was getting record album, LPs, and things like that. And then I was opening up one of the presents from a neighbor who didn't go to school at the same school I did, and I opened it up, and it was a He-Man action figure. And oh my gosh, I will never forget the conflict I had. Because inside, I was like, dude, I've been wanting this Skeletor so bad. But I was also looking up at the girls sitting there looking at me, and I was like, oh, this is cool, Scott. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah.
Being mortified that these girls are seeing me open up a Skeletor action figure. Which today I would think would be just awesome to get a Skeletor action figure, but it was such a teenage awkward moment. So
that's awesome. I love that.
He-Man is right there. He-Man is definitely at my top of my list.
I've actually got a story about that, but we're related to the Visionaries action figures. Of all, if you even remember that, I love that. No, I think we can all relate to that. Another one of those truly satisfying moments where I get to talk to Tom and Corey each and every week on CWK Pour Over. And that's not the only joy of being a Patreon contributor. But speaking of Patreon contributors, I want to thank Ben Elkington, Rebecca Raven, Dennis Keithley, Terry Lee, Melinda Wolf, Wayne Booker, Aaron Harris, Chris Skavarka, Angela Sauce, Mediocre Jedi, Phil Picaro, Tim Bungaroth, Chris Metz, LJ Sauter, Thea Selby, Jeff Ellis, Daz Davies, Christian Dale, Jason Hall, Brian McKinney, Connie Shee, Mike Audette, Jerry Cantor, BJ Smith, Eric Struthers, Nick Deco, and Mark Suter. Because of all of you, Coffee with Kenobi is able to grow and expand into many different ways and avenues and things that you've seen and things that are yet to come. It's because of your generosity and your contributions. For $5 or more a month, you get to hear CWK Pour Over each and every week. It is a 30-minute weekly podcast exclusive to Coffee with Kenobi Patreon contributors. We talk about Star Wars, we talk about pop culture, we share some insights into our family and the day-to-day, and some behind the scenes of Coffee with Kenobi. And it is a blast to record, it's a blast to hear your feedback, and we can't do it again without your contributions. And in addition to that, there are coffee mugs, T-shirts, and other opportunities if you are a member of our CWK family. Weigh in on what topics you want us to talk about, both on Patreon as well as on the regular show, Coffee with Kenobi. So if you have any questions or want to check out more about it, or if you already know, hey, I love these clips, I want to listen regularly, please do, because we've got over 27 back shows on there for you to listen to anytime you want, day or night. And actually, the Patreon app is really good for that. So be sure to go to www.patreon.com/coffeewithkenobi for more details. And while you're supporting us, be sure to support the official brew of Coffee with Kenobi. That is One Nation Coffee. It smells amazing and tastes even better. They even have a subscription service that is really convenient. I have One Nation Coffee every single morning, and it always starts my morning off exactly the way I want to. Be sure to go to www.onenationcoffee.com to order the official brew of Coffee with Kenobi today. Sign up for a subscription service so you never miss your favorite Java, and put in the code Kenobi10 so you can get 10% off your first order. We are back, and we are on our next one. It's the third one we've mentioned, and I guess it's going to be the third whether you're going forwards or backwards, as I'm no math major, but I do know that. So, Scott, we're going to go back to you. Give us your third one.
Number 3 for me is the Ewoks.
Oh, cool.
I am a fan and a defender of the Ewoks.
Yes.
I think they were funny. For one, I'm a big fan of Paplu stealing the speeder bike. It still makes me laugh to this day.
Even the name is funny.
Yes. And, you know, I still contend that the idea that the Empire comes there and gets beaten by these little bears is totally conceivable, because it's a classic situation that we've seen in history when a powerful empire goes into a territory they don't know as well as the natives do, and they get beat. And that's essentially what happened on Endor. And so I really love the fact that they figured out ways to have their primitive weapons and their knowledge of that planet be something that would help the rebels turn the tide, even when it looked like the Empire was getting the upper hand. So I had a lot of the figures as a kid. I had Logray and Chief Turpa and Wicket, of course, and all of those. It made me want to watch the Ewok adventure movies when they hit television. So I am just a big fan of the Ewoks. I always have been. So I know there's a lot of hate about the Ewoks, but I think it's misplaced.
Yes.
I feel like that's too. So I think it's kind of dissipated. I think people have decided to shift their vitriol.
Well, after we got Jar Jar Binks, they're like, hey, lay off the Ewoks. There ain't no Jar Jar.
It's true. And then now that there are people that don't like The Last Jedi or whatever, and then it suddenly becomes something else.
Yeah, but I mean, you got to remember that this stuff, we saw this when we were kids. There had to be elements to make us laugh and be entertained in a childlike, innocent way. And the Ewoks provided that. You know, the speeder bike theft is a perfect example of a little comic relief in a tense situation. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I totally agree with the Ewoks deserve no hate.
No, I agree. I love the Ewoks, and I will say they are actually essential to this film, because when you watch it, even now, these themes are extremely heavy and could be very oppressive if you really took them in for what they really are trying to tell you about these characters. You need the Ewoks in there to lighten that mood. Mm-hmm. For sure. Aaron, what's your next one?
It's also sound related, but this one for a very different reason. It's the music in the battle between Vader and Luke.
Yeah.
When Luke is hiding under the stairs in the shadows, and then Vader finds out, he senses through the Force that Leia's sister, and Luke screams no, and then they do this battle, and what happens is, and I could be totally wrong on this, but I do believe it's the very, very first time they used a choir in the music of Star Wars in the original trilogy. Mm-hmm.
I think
it's a very low-voiced male choir. Certainly, it's the very first time I noticed vocals in any of the Star Wars music. But for the longest time, I didn't understand why this piece of music moved me emotionally more so than any of the other Star Wars music. And we all will agree that Star Wars has some tremendous, swelling, epic themes that are easy to get caught up in and sing in your head the whole way home after you leave the theater. But this one piece of music really emotionally charged the moment for me while I watched this movie. And it took forever and ever to figure out why. And I realized this is the first time I've heard human voices backing up the orchestra in the Star Wars universe. And then that carried over big time when Episode 1 came out, and you have the battle between Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Darth Maul, and you have the big, huge choir, I mean, it's massive in size, and it really makes those moments feel extra epic when they have like the big throwdown battle. And so, this is, I think, the birthplace of adding a choir very, very subtly, but it led to an expansion of the language of Star Wars music forever and ever after that. And I think that's a big moment.
I do too. I also think it adds to the kind of the eeriness of that situation too.
Oh yeah.
Does the Emperor's theme have a choir?
You know what? That's a good question. Does it? I know exactly where you
think so. And
it sure sounds like it.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like it. I didn't know for sure though.
I don't know if it is or not. It just sounds. I don't know. We'll have to research that. Let me check. Let me call David Collins really quick. Yeah. Good deal. Well, my third one is Luke's growth in this film. I think it's a wonderful exclamation point to the original trilogy, because his growth is a poised, disciplined adult with purpose, and he's still a little bit naive, and maybe a little too self-aware, but that ends up being quite a check in his column, because he has this hard-earned lesson that leads to the end of the Empire and a redemption of Darth Vader, and that is to choose to avoid the temptation, this myth of redemptive violence that we still have in Hollywood that I don't think is ever going to go away. I mean, I could be wrong, but I doubt it. But he typifies this notion that, no, I'm not going to fight your aggression and your hate and your ugliness with a weapon. I'm going to choose love. And the only other time a Jedi does this is when Luke does it again in The Last Jedi. And I think this is why Luke may arguably be the best Jedi that we've seen to this point. Doesn't mean that, someone might eclipse him someday, although that seems sort of hard to imagine, but I don't know. Who knows? But what does matter to me is Luke, what he means to this franchise. And I think this and the combination of The Empire Strikes Back, I mean, we see him come full circle, and it's magnificent to see. He's the narrative weight and structure to this film. You've got a lot of fun things going on there, or sometimes a little silly. He brings the gravitas, and he brings it in a beautiful way.
Quick poll of everyone here. When I was growing up, as a young boy, you either identified as a Han type character, rogue type character, or a Luke type character, a little bit more innocent, play by the rules kind of guy. I always identified as a Luke. What'd you guys identify as? Did you ever gravitate towards one or the other personality?
I've been a Luke person from day one.
Me too.
I mean, I had, like I said, I had that green lightsaber that you found at the toy store that was all one stick. And I had my mom had gotten me this like sweatsuit that was like a long sleeve jacket that was navy, and it had a stripe on it, but it was dark enough to where I felt like I could make it work to be Luke's outfit in Jedi. Right. So I always wore that while I was holding the lightsaber, because that was how I would play Luke. So I have a portion of my office dedicated to Luke. Awesome. So I am a Luke person and have been since those days.
I don't think I've ever seen a picture of your office, guy. I'd love to see that.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be cool. No, and I knew all of you were going to say that. I mean, I've always liked the leader that takes the good path. In fact, when I was at the solo junket, I asked the Kazans, what it's like to create a character in a morally ambiguous world, and it was cool to hear their conversation about that. I think that's why Luke resonates so much, because he chooses the dark. He chooses to resist darkness. He chooses to resist gray. And there are moments when he has the option to go that direction, and he's somewhat tempted because he's a human being, but he quickly reroutes because he's a hero. What's your next one, Scott?
Well, my next one kind of ties to things I've already touched on, and it really ties heavily into my number one, so it'll be rather simple. But I'm just going to say just some of the unexpected victories and resolutions that took place. Each time that you thought, there was either an impossible situation or one where you're just sitting there going, how are they going to get out of this? I think about when Luke fell into the Rancor pit, no way out of that room. How's he going to fend this thing off? I think of the fight with Vader. Because I remember as a kid going, how's he going to fight? How's he going to fight, much less defeat him without killing his own father, and yet still achieving the mission? And, especially when you're 10 years old, you're not necessarily a deep storyteller. Well, you might be. Maybe you're a little advanced or something. But I was sitting there going, I don't know how they do this, how he faces Vader. And I remember, the feeling the exact same way that you had described when Luke really kind of took over that fight the way he did. So, there just were, and then of course walking the plank, it is still to this day one of my favorite scenes, if not my favorite scene out of the entire trilogy. Because again, I was sitting there thinking, okay, well, he's walking the plank. Everybody's tied up. And there's no way out of this.
Right, yeah. This will be a short movie.
Yeah, it gave me one of my favorite scenes of all time, and I'm very attached to that green lightsaber. So, yeah, I mean, it just created, 2 or 3, situations that looked really, really hard to get out of and gave us very satisfying and very cool resolutions.
And that's another thing I think I wanted and I love about these movies is there's enough bad or enough yucky in the world, and to see even when times are tough, that good prevails, I think is such an important part of this saga and why I love it so much.
Well, good didn't prevail so much in Empire.
No, but there are moments. There are moments. But
there are. You got to have the struggle before you can have the rise.
That's right. That's right. You have to go through that struggle before, and that makes the resurrection that much more powerful. What's the next one you have?
My number 2 and number 1 kind of go hand in hand, but just for dramatices, I'm going to do number 2 by itself and say the matte paintings across the entire trilogy. But if you think about all of the impossible things that George Lucas and Lawrence Kasdan were able to show us throughout these movies, before we had the aid of computers, the only way they could do that was by having a brilliant artist create a very beautiful, realistic looking matte painting, and then etching a little hole in that painting so they can shoot through the glass an actor walking up to, Jabba's palace, or inside, almost anytime you're inside the Death Star looking at a hangar where there's 500 troops all lined up, that's usually a matte painting, and the aisle where the main actors are walking out is just the clear piece of glass where they were able to shoot those actors for that little bit, and it's all framing and technique, and that's part of the movie magic that I fell in love with in the old school days of you needed to have a puppet, you needed to have a matte painting. And so when J.J. Abrams decided to go back to physical props in The Force Awakens, I was just thrilled, because if you look at the prequels, a lot of the actors are kind of have this deer in headlights look. They don't know where to put their eyes, and they don't know where to focus because they're not really looking at anything. There's nothing there for them to look at. And that's got to be hard as heck for an actor to, do. So when JJ decides to actually, bring back physical props and not rely so much on CG, I was elated by that. But the precursor to all of that was still just a very simple matte painting and a brilliant artist.
Yeah, and I think that what you mentioned with the prequels too, I think that's affected how movies in this CGI-heavy era have been made and improved, so that we don't have those problems with sightlines and things like that.
Now they put a pogo stick on someone's head with a tennis ball so you can look up 3 feet and know where their eyesight is, the eye line contact. Yeah. And like whatever helps the actor, man. I mean, don't leave him stranded against a green screen and just go, you're in lava. Like, well, wouldn't that hurt? I mean, how does that work? How am I fighting in lava? Please explain. Should I do a hot step thing with my foot while I'm running through the lava? I mean, what's up here?
Right. It's true. Well, in that realism combined with the fantasy element is ties in nicely to my next one, which is Jabba the Hutt and the aura of Jabba's palace. That mystical concept of we're going to see Jabba the Hutt, before we actually knew what he was going to look like, and that scene of C-3PO and R2-D2 going down this kind of roughly paved road, and you can see the palace in the distance, and what that meant, what we're going to see, and we're finally going to find out what Han Solo is going to do to get out of this, giant ice cube that he's in, that seemed just so awful and just broke our hearts at the end of The Empire Strikes Back. And then Luke showing up and seeing everybody reunited slowly but surely. And who is that character? Oh, it's Princess Leia. And C-3PO was like, are you kidding me? We're going to be gifts for Jabba. What are you talking about? And R2 is just calm and doing his mission. And you find out that droids, some droids don't have empathy for their own. And it was just a wonderful way to set that stage. In fact, every time the sequence with Tatooine is over, even though I love seeing Yoda and Obi-Wan again, I always feel a little bit of a letdown because I really liked that intensity of that moment. It was very, very old school, and at the time new school, and it was pretty magic. Pretty magic. So let's go ahead and take our last break. When we come back, we're going to have a little bit of a treat for you. We're going to do a quick news segment, where Tom is going to join us and talk about the tragic loss we faced this week when we lost Gary Kurtz. And then to brighten things up a bit, my son Mason is going to join us to talk about things he loved about Return of the Jedi. And then after that, we're going to close out this segment with Scott and Aaron. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
Greetings. This is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
So this weekend is my birthday. I'm very excited about that. I'm not one of those people who shies away from birthday attention. I actually love birthday attention. It's fun. I think you should celebrate life. And one of the ways I'm preparing for my birthday is, of course, to get a nice, clean, comfortable shave. And what does that mean for me? Well, for me, that means Harry's razors. What I love about Harry's razors is the closeness of the shave. I love the way the razor feels, the way it handles, and the scent of the shave gel is amazing. Harry stands behind the quality of their blades, and they know that switching razors is not an easy decision. So they have created a trial offer. You can claim yours today by going to harrys.com/CWK Family. Harry's founders were fed up with overpaying for expensive razors with unnecessary features, and they knew a great shave comes down to great blades, made with sharp, durable steel that lasts. And that's why they bought a factory that's been making some of the highest quality blades in the world for over 95 years. By selling directly to you over the internet, Harry's can offer their blades at a price much lower than the leading brand, just $2 per blade compared to $4 or more. And you have a quality guarantee. If you don't love your shave, let Harry's know within 30 days and they will give you a full refund. Now let me give you the details on this trial offer. And this is the only way you can use Harry's and support Coffee with Kenobi at the same time. You get a $13 value trial set that comes with everything you need for a close, comfortable shave. A weighted ergonomic handle, a 5-blade razor with a lubricating strip and trimmer blade, rich lathering shave gel, and a travel blade cover. Listeners of my show can redeem their trial set at harrys.com/CWK Family. That's all one word. Make sure to go to harrys.com/CWK Family to redeem your offer and let them know I sent you to help support this show. We're back and it is news time. This is one of those times, Tom, where we have some major Star Wars news that we need to talk about, and it's definitely very sad. It's sad and beautiful, I think.
Well, that is true. Legendary film producer Gary Kurtz died earlier this week at age 78. Kurtz worked as the producer of Star Wars A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back along with director George Lucas. The two University of Southern California film school graduates met when Kurtz was 30, and soon after he first worked with Lucas on American Graffiti in 1973. According to ABC News, Kurtz didn't work on Return of the Jedi because he had differences in script. Kurtz was quoted as saying that he didn't want to blow up another Death Star. Kurtz went on to produce The Dark Crystal in 1982 and Return of Oz in 1985. George Lucas released a statement that Gary's passing will be, quote, felt through the Star Wars family. Through what were sometimes challenging shooting difficulties and conditions, his contributions as a producer helped stories to life on screen. Mark Hamill tweeted that he has lost a lifelong friend and knows he is a better man for knowing Gary Kurtz. And Peter Mayhew tweeted that there would be no Force without him. Kurtz will be remembered for the incredible films that he made that touched the lives of millions. According to ABC, he died in North London, England, and according to friends and family, he had been battling cancer for about a year.
And that's terrible. I mean, I have family members now that are fighting cancer, and I mean, I don't think there's anyone listening to the show that doesn't know someone who is battling cancer or they lost someone they love to cancer. It's a terrible thing, obviously. And he was young. He's 78. That's not old. That's really not old. And what an amazing impact this man had on Hollywood and on Star Wars and on cinema, period. I mean, there is no Coffee with Kenobi without Gary Kurtz. He helped pioneer just there even being a chance for Star Wars to be on the big screen. And you won't find anyone saying a crossword about him. He had a heavy impact. I'm glad you mentioned Hamill's tweet and Peter Mayhew's. And I love seeing interviews about him on the documentaries, especially the ones when they came out with the Star Wars Blu-ray or the Star Wars Special Edition. And he talked about, the grind of the shoot and just making this all come together and making sense of this and believing in something that most of Hollywood did not think would work. He's a big reason why we have Star Wars, and he will be greatly missed.
Yeah, There's a great photo circulating around social media and showing up on news sites of Kurtz standing on set with facing Harrison Ford, but then on one side and then off to the other side is Mark Hamill. And it's a phenomenal shot. I've never seen this picture before. Yeah, he's in his khaki jacket and handsome beard and slick back hair, and they just look all so great. You can see the chemistry in that photo. And some other places I've seen the conversation of, if it weren't for Kurtz, there was no Force. That Kurtz really helped to define what the Force is in the Star Wars story. So no doubt about it. What a loss, but also what a blessing to have him in part of the Star Wars family, as George Lucas said. In our next story tonight, the first 5 episodes and synopses for the Star Wars Resistance program were released this week. Guest stars in these episodes include previously announced Oscar Isaac as Poe Dameron and Gwendolyn Christie as Captain Phasma, but newly announced this week is Elijah Wood of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, starring as Jace Rucklin, and then Jim Rash of Community, and one of my favorites, Bobby Moynihan, of course, of DuckTales and Saturday Night Live, as Flix and Orca. Star Wars Resistance debuts on October 7th with the Recruit Part 1, followed with the Recruit Part 2 1 week later, and then rounding out the October schedule with episodes titled The Triple Dark, Fuel for the Fire, and The High Tower. Exciting news indeed about Star Wars Resistance.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you for seeing this first episode?
You know what? If you asked me about 4 weeks ago, I'd have said, 4 or 5. But I have to say, the closer we're getting to it and the more information that's coming out, like the character breakdown of that video a few weeks ago, and then this news today, I'm getting up in a 6, 7, 8 kind of range. I'm pretty excited about this. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm really looking forward to our special CWK correspondent that has been on our show before, and he's also my brother-in-law, Bill Thill. He was kind enough to cover the event for Coffee with Kenobi today in Hollywood. And so we're going to hear from him very soon. Not on this show, but we'll probably put it in next week's show, because he got to see the first couple of episodes already, and he got to sit down with some of the crew and cast, and it's going to be cool. I know that he had a blast, so I'll save some of his stories for later, but it sounds like the show is incredibly fun. And that's no surprise, because we love our Star Wars, and they're going to carry on that tradition. So that's great news.
Indeed. Looking forward to the fun.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I am too. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead. And we're not going to actually take a break just yet, because now I'm going to play the conversation I had with Mason Z himself, my son. We just watched Return of the Jedi, and since this entire show is about Return of the Jedi, it's a perfect time to bring him back on and let us know what he thought about Return of the Jedi. So without further ado, here's Mason Z. Well, we just had our news segment, and it's time for a bit of a pick-me-up on Coffee with Kenobi. And there's no better way to do that, and no better person to do that with than my little co-host for this show, Mason Z. How's it going, Mason?
Good.
Super glad to have you back on Coffee with Kenobi. As you know, and our listeners of Coffee with Kenobi know, you have seen Star Wars A New Hope and Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, but you never had seen Star Wars Return of the Jedi. But now you have. What did you think?
I like when the Ewoks won against those Skywalkers. Mm-hmm. I like that they put logs on the Skywalkers.
Oh, yeah, and they got their feet, and they got all and they fell down.
Yep.
So would you say Return of the Jedi is an awesome movie?
Yep.
And I asked you, and I'm not sure if you changed your mind since we saw it about a week ago, I think. Then I asked you if it was your favorite Star Wars movie. What did you say?
Yes.
Yes. Have you changed your mind, or is it still your favorite?
Still my favorite.
Really? How come?
Because I like the Ewoks.
The Ewoks, that's a good choice. What do you like about the Ewoks?
I like that they have good tricks and good stuff.
They do, and I think it's fair to say they're cute. Do you think they're cute?
Yep.
Yep. Do you remember some of the Ewoks' names?
One I know, Wicket.
Wicket is a good one. What does he look like?
a little tiny porg.
He looks like a tiny porg. So tell me, I think I know what you're going to say, but maybe you'll surprise me. You often do, and that's a great thing. What is your favorite part of Return of the Jedi?
When the Darth Vader throws the Emperor down in the Death Star.
In the elevator shaft? Oh, and he wins? Yep. Yeah, were you surprised by that?
No.
How come?
Because you told me about it and we read a book.
Yes, we did read that golden book, which in retrospect, I don't know if I would have shown you that or read that to you so many times before we saw the movie, but I still think there were a lot of surprises, weren't there?
Yep.
What were you the most surprised about?
When Anakin, when he was younger, and Obi-Wan and Yoda showed up at the end.
Oh, yeah, what did that mean?
I liked the dance at that part.
Oh, when they dance? Yeah, we rewound that part and we did a dance, didn't we?
Yep.
That was fun. And you were surprised when you saw Anakin and Obi-Wan and Yoda. Why did they look like that?
Because they were in the Force.
That's right, they were in the Force, exactly. Well, you still haven't told me your favorite part yet, so I'm going to see if I can refresh your memory. What happens at the beginning of the movie?
Tatooine.
Tatooine is right, exactly. So why do they go to Tatooine? I can't remember.
His Han Solo is frozen in carbonated Jabba's palace.
Han Solo is frozen in carbonated Jabba's palace. So how do they get him out?
Princess Leia disguises as Boosh.
Yeah, she disguised herself like Boosh, exactly. And it tricked everybody, didn't it?
Yep. Jabba didn't even know.
No, he didn't. So how did she get him out?
His monkey didn't even know he's right there.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he's pointing to my Kenner Salacious Crumb, which I have on the wall of my studio. It's got all of the Kenner figures, doesn't it? So Princess Leia disguises Boosh, gets Han Solo free. So then they're free and they just walk out the door, right?
No.
No? What happened?
Jabba knows right after she does it.
So who shows up and saves everybody?
Luke.
Luke. Tell me about that cool part with Luke. What does he do?
I like when he's fit into the Starlight Pit and he jumps into action.
Yeah, I did jump into action. Then how does he start taking care of business? What does he get from R2-D2?
R2-D2 throws the lightsaber window and he put his hands on the board and he flipped back up and he catched it.
That's exactly right.
And he turned it on and got some bad guy.
And what color was his lightsaber?
Green.
Green is right. So then what happened?
Last time in the other two movies it was blue.
You're right. Well, you're getting good at this Star Wars podcast stuff. Yeah. Do you remember what happened to Boba Fett?
He got eaten by the Starlight Pit.
That's right. How did he end up in the Starlight Pit? It seems like he'd be smart enough to get out of there. So then Han Solo knocks Boba Fett into the Starlight Pit, which is very exciting. And the Starlight Pit makes a burping noise.
Yep.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I think we get that part. So tell me the part that was the funniest at Jabba's palace that you laughed at. The Rancor.
Yes!
What happens?
He ate the Gimli God.
Why do you think that was silly?
Because I like it.
Okay, well that's probably the 5-year-old in you, I would say. So then they get free, and they go back to see Yoda and Dagobah. And what happens on Dagobah?
He almost dies.
Who does?
Yoda!
Oh, but I thought he did, because doesn't he go to the Force?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he does. Was that sad?
No.
No? How come?
Because Luke Skywalker is an even better one now.
Oh, that's true. And then, so Luke finds out something really important from Obi-Wan Kenobi on Dagobah. What does he find out?
Princess Leia is his sister.
No, wait. Now, that was a surprise to you, wasn't it?
Yes, I thought it was Obi-Wan.
You thought he was going to be the other person when Yoda said there is another? Oh, but it was Princess Leia. So how does Luke feel about that?
Happy?
He is happy. And what does Han Solo think? Why is he confused for most of the movie?
Because Princess Leia doesn't tell him.
Oh, that's right. Why doesn't she tell him right away?
I don't know.
You know, no one to think about that, I guess. So then Luke goes and he confronts Darth Vader, who's his father, by the way. Did you know that?
Darth Vader.
Yeah, that's right. So what happens when he goes and confronts Darth Vader?
The Emperor puts lightning on him. And the Darth Vader throws him into the, what's it called?
The Death Star. the Death Star.
The Death Star.
Mm-hmm. Down into the. Now I can't remember what it's technically called. Down the shaft. We'll say that.
Shaft.
Down the shaft. Why does Luke Skywalker throw away his lightsaber? Wouldn't he need that against the Emperor? Why does he throw it away?
I don't know.
You don't remember? We talked about this for a long time.
What?
Remember why does he? What is he trying to show the Emperor when he gives up his lightsaber? What is he not going to do?
Fight Darth Vader?
Yeah, and why won't he fight? What do good guys do?
They help people.
That's right. And fighting is not a good thing, is it?
But they should, because Darth Vader is cranky.
Yeah, that's right. So they only use a lightsaber to protect themselves. I think that's a good lesson, don't you?
And fighting Darth Vader was a little bit protecting himself.
I agree with you. Why do you say that?
Because Darth Vader could have, with his lightsaber, cut Luke's hand off again.
Oh, we don't want that to happen. But instead he does that to Darth Vader, and then he looks down at his hand and he realizes what?
That he's like his father.
Yeah, he says, I better stop being...
Want to know something?
Yeah, I do.
I was going to say the same thing.
You were going to say the same thing? Oh, that is so cute. That's so cool. I guess you're a pretty smart little dude, huh? I'm glad that I thought the same thing as you. I must be doing pretty good. Because you're doing a good job with these movies. I'm really proud of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about Return of the Jedi?
No.
Okay. Well, Mason, thanks again for coming back on Coffee with Kenobi. I bet you'll be a little bit older before we watch the next movie. Yeah, so this is what I want you to say, okay?
What?
Say, we're going to go ahead and take a break.
We're going to go ahead and take a break.
And then say, this is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Coffee with Kenobi.
Thanks. We'll be right back.
Coffee, tea, or me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's Coffee with Kenobi.
One Nation Coffee is the official brew of Coffee with Kenobi. I start my morning every day with One Nation Coffee because it is the best. You can start your coffee subscription so you never miss out on the best coffee in the galaxy by going to www.onenationcoffee.com today. Plus, enter the code Kenobi10 to set up a coffee subscription and save 10% off your first order. MEI and Mousefan Travel, that is the official travel agency of Coffee with Kenobi. I use it for all of my travel needs for the show, as well as for me and my family. They have signature service and expert advice to help clients maximize their vacation time and dollar. They will also help your family enjoy everything the Disney theme parks and the cruise line have to offer, help plan every detail, and share invaluable tips. Check out www.mousefantravel.com today and let them know Coffee with Kenobi sent you. We are back, and Scott and Aaron are with me, and we're going to finish off our list, and we are going to continue the tradition of a few honorable mentions, and I don't know how many the two of you have. Maybe this conversation has brought some out in you. Hard to say, but Scott, it looks like we are on your number one.
So is this just the number one, or is this number one in honorable mentions?
Well, dude, let's do our ones, and then after we all go through our ones, and we'll all do our honorable mentions.
By the way, on my last one, the one thing I forgot to mention regarding unexpected resolution is Vader throwing the Emperor over the side of the rail.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, I definitely, I mean, you talk about a jaw-dropping moment. Didn't see that happening. And yes, I still prefer him to throw him without yelling no.
You know what? Yeah. I actually like the no, and
I don't like the no.
Dream, I would say that I'm a pretty staunch critic of the special editions, but I actually found that powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I just think the silence of it all, I felt was a bigger impact for me. But my number one, I mean, I've mentioned him many times, very much like Dan, you mentioned him in your list. It's just the what Luke becomes, not only at the end of it, but in the beginning of it. I mean, I remember being a big Luke person. It was just a thrill just to see him walk in Jabba's palace with the gravitas that he had, you know, with the robe and the black. And then, you know, the Gamorrean guards come up to him and he just chokes them and put him out of the way, which isn't really what he's technically supposed to do, I think. But, you know, still, it was just a sign that, you know, he was becoming a master at this. And I just loved how after all the peril we had seen in the palace, that here comes Luke and he's looking Jabba directly in the eye saying, you are going to give me back my friends, or you are going to suffer the consequences. And then, of course, the scene that made my head explode in the theater, which is the moment we've all talked about today on the plank and the green lightsaber. Like I said, anytime I find anything with Luke and the green lightsaber, I have to have it. Unfortunately, I don't see it a whole lot. It's always that blue one more often than not. But when I find something, I have to grab it if I can. And it was great when I went to Celebration years ago to have Mark sign a picture of Luke holding the green lightsaber. Really meant a lot to me for a lot of those reasons. And again, when it came to the confrontation with Vader, I mean, it was just awesome because he had to face him, and this time he was really prepared for it. I love the conversation they have before they go to the Emperor, and Luke makes an attempt really to get into Vader's head and heart right there with everything that he says, and explains to him, here's why you haven't killed me. Here's why you haven't destroyed me. And it's not too late to come all the way back around. And when that doesn't work, I love how he's a little bit cocky when he has to talk to the Emperor.
Yeah.
Your overconfidence is your weakness, and he's just trying to show everybody, you're not going to fluster me. You're not going to turn me. And then, despite the fact you really hate to see him have to do what in some ways he didn't want to do, it was still awesome to see someone finally defeat Darth Vader, and that it was Luke that did it. Yep. And obviously it was ironic how he did it, cutting the hand off and everything. But just what Luke had become and what he is at the end of that movie speaks volumes, I think.
Insanely powerful. I mean, the Shakespearean motifs are replete in that scene, and that's a good call too on his conversation with Vader on Endor before they head up to there. I think that might be the heaviest narrative moment in that entire film. It's a great scene, and then when he ignites that lightsaber and we flinch with Luke.
Yeah.
What is he doing? What is he doing? Turn that off.
Yeah. What's he going to do with that?
Yeah.
Aaron, what's your last one?
Mine is going hand in hand with the matte paintings. The matte paintings wouldn't work by themselves unless you had some awesome models to go with it. The spaceships. I mean, I've always loved the spaceships. And when I learned what the word greebly meant, when they just added bric-a-brac to the model to make it look more complex and less smooth and, more mechanical, and pipes and all that kind of stuff, just kind of tacked on to make it look more realistic and functional and complex. And the traveling Star Wars show that has like all the props and the costumes and the models was in Indianapolis, where I'm at, a few years ago. And I was honored enough to be a part of the press crew to get a preview of that before it was open to the public. And the actual Millennium Falcon that they shot has got to be like 3.5, 4 feet wide in circumference. It's just massive. And then the Tantive 4, I got to ask one of the curators of the museum if it was true. I'd always heard this rumor that the makers of the Tantive 4 had put a little miniature poster of Star Wars into the cockpit just behind the window. So if you were to look straight through the window of Tantive 4, you'd see a little Star Wars poster hanging right next to the door that leads out into the main hallway. And I said, is that true? And they said, as a matter of fact, no, it's not. And my heart was broken. They said, it's even better. And I went, ooh, what is it? It turns out it's a tiny, tiny, itty-bitty centerfold of Playboy from the month and year that Star Wars came out. and they actually got a little pen light, and we weren't allowed to use flash photography for whatever reason, strict lighting control to preserve the models or whatever, but they actually broke out a pen light, and we got like nose up to the glass, and he shined it straight in. And yeah, there is just this little itty bitty little centerfold hanging by the door in the back of the Tantive 4 model that was used for the shooting of Episode 4, as we know it now, A New Hope. And that's just that little detail of stupid nerdery fills me with such joy, because I mean, I had heard this rumor for years and years before I ever got to see a model up close. But when I actually got to see the model that they shot on film, was like, I just wanted to hug it. You know, it was like, that's the thing that flew over my head when I was just 3 years old. Oh my God. And then to peek into the cockpit, which you've never seen on screen before, and see this little detail, man, I was over the moon, ready to do somersaults with joy at that little bit of geekery. So I love the models.
I had no idea. That's a bit of trivia I had no idea about.
Yeah.
So that means if Lando had walked in there, he'd say, hello, what do we have here?
Yeah.
He might still be sitting in there, yeah. So my last one is Kenner's original wave of the Return of the Jedi action figure line. With when my friend walked into school, he had Luke, but more importantly, he had the card that Luke was on, and we flipped it over and we looked at, I think it was the first 12, and it was, Luke and Squid Head and Bib Fortuna, and it just, I just kept thinking, who are these characters in the Emperor's Royal Guard and Boosh, and I was just so excited in Admiral Akbar, I just couldn't believe I was going to get some more action figures. So the hunt began. We went to Toys R Us, moment of silence for Toys R Us, and just seeing this huge wall of figures. I don't know how many times. This is the kind of stuff that goes through my mind during the day, and I'm sure you can both relate. But I often think if I had a time machine, I'm going back to when they put those new Kenner figures on the wall, baby, because I'm going to get a whole bunch of them and keep them in the package. And oh my goodness, just seeing that and the excitement, knowing there was a new Star Wars film coming out where we got to find out what happened to our heroes and see Darth Vader again and see Luke Skywalker with his new lightsaber. And oh my gosh, this is an action figure where he holds the lightsaber, and it was just really exciting. It's actually the right color, because the Empire one was yellow. Not the Hoth one, but his Bespin fatigues. So that was such a huge memory for me, and a big reason why I love Return of the Jedi. So now we've got some honorable mentions. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 5 of them.
Okay.
And I'm just going to launch them real quickly. I'm not going to explain too much, but I had to have them on the list. Do you guys have honorable mentions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a couple.
Yeah, who wants to go first?
Mine's short and sweet, so I can knock it out in a couple of seconds. Sure. Number 1 honorable mention: the skeleton of Vader when he tosses the Emperor over the edge. That moment really stuck with me for a long time afterwards, because it was a reminder, like, we hadn't seen him yet as a human. In my stupid little kid mind, he was still a robot. I know in episode 5 he said, Luke, I am your father. I didn't understand how that worked yet, so he was still a robot to me. And when the skeleton showed up, I was like, wait a minute, there's a dude under there? And then Luke takes off the helmet, and I'm like, hey, what's with this old guy? Well, actually, we did see him in Empire where he had his helmet taken off, but he just caught the back of his head.
But it was hard to know what that was. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was still kind of on the young side, where I was just like, I just thought he was a robot. Because when Luke cuts off his hand, there's wires coming out. That's a robot.
Yeah. No,
so,
that
and
makes sense.
Moving on to my next one, and this is the only, I think, bad thing about, if there is such a thing, Boba Fett goes down like a punk. He's supposed to be, the baddest dude in the galaxy, or so we've been led to believe. He's always an ominous presence lingering in the background, ready to, tear stuff up if need be. And then when the action hits, he accidentally gets killed by an accidental tap on his own jetpack. But the bright side of this is that we get Breckin Meyer doing Boba Fett in the Sarlacc pit for Robot Chicken, which that whole thing, I nearly wet myself 5 times watching that one episode of Breckin Meyer's Boba Fett. Oh, hey, I went up there and I threw in a thermal detonator. Bam, bam, bam. It was, oh man, my wife loves that. I love it. So yeah, I was kind of disappointed that Boba Fett went down in such a way, but years later we get a Killer Robot Chicken parody of it. So that's my honorable mentions.
I always liked that. I always thought it was so poetic, because I never understood the love for him. So I thought it was kind of poetic justice. But I totally see the other side of it too.
Right. Well, I was a fan. I mean, it was just the thing of he was the mystery card. You know, he didn't have really any lines, but he was always the enforcer. I mean, who does Vader need to back him up, right? But when he chooses someone to stand over his shoulder, it's going to be Boba Fett. And so there's got to be something bad about the dude for Vader to make him, you know, the one that stands behind him. And so, yeah, I mean, it's like this anticipation of just waiting for him to break out in badass greatness, you know, and then he just dies. Horribly, and then stupidly.
And then Boba Fett is probably, at least to me, the best action figure out of the Kenner line. I mean, he's by far the best looking. He's a great figure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
Scott,
I was a fan of the Fett.
Oh, big time. Scott, you've got some honorable mentions, I trust?
Yeah, they're kind of connected in a way. I would say that, you know, just some of the cool vehicles that we saw for the first time, like the Imperial Shuttle, which also led to a great toy. So I would tie it to the toys as well. Although you had to hold that thing with two arms to get it to hold up there and then open up those wings. And then, of course, things like the speeder bike, which was just the coolest thing, you know.
With the little button that triggered it to explode.
Yeah. Or, I mean, and just the skill you would have to have, you know, one wrong move and you run into a tree. You know, it was another example of George's, you know, love of speed and vehicles that are fast, because, I mean, again, this is still pre-heavy duty special effects. So to be going in a theater in 1983 and seeing these people get on these motorcycle looking things and speed through a forest, you know, weaving in and out of those trees. And of course, Luke has that great moment where he falls off, lights up that green saber and, cuts one in half. Yeah. So that was always one of the cool things. I think both of you have alluded to to seeing the new things that were coming out with each film, and Return of the Jedi definitely had that, especially when it came to some of those vehicles, because, you know, you see that Imperial shuttle land, and then the Emperor coming out for the first time too was a pretty big moment, especially since it was a different person than we had seen in Empire, but he still had quite the presence about him. And because, you know, you never really thought much, you know, you always kind of wondered who he was, what he looked like, and how he controlled things. And that was pretty big to see then too. It really kind of put everything up a new level. But I guess he was going to have to be on that Death Star for the Rebels to win when they took it out.
Yeah. Right. No, I love that. That's in that sequence you're talking about when he's fighting the biker scouts. The way he falls so gracefully, like as it's like almost like a somersault under the ground. I love that.
Very controlled.
It's not more. Yeah, exactly. My honorable mentions. The first one I have is the Imperial Shuttle. It was just a neat design. I still think it should have stayed out of the Empire Strikes Back and just kept it for the reveal in Return of the Jedi, because I just like the look of it. The Emperor's Royal Guards. I mentioned the figures of them. I thought they were so mysterious, and they don't really do anything in the movie, but just kind of stand there and look awesome, and that definitely works. Ewoks, I love the Ewoks. I always loved them, even when I was in those years between, you know, being a boy and being a man. I still like the Ewoks, and I love that my son loves them. It makes it even better. Now, I also mentioned speeder bikes, but more so how I love them as a kid. They just seem so fast and imposing, and I love getting my hands on the toys. When you watch it now, you can just tell that it's, you know, an older technology, even though it's still fun and really cool. And I put Vader's Redemption, although I feel like, to be fair, when I was a kid, the first time I saw Return of the Jedi, and for a while, I didn't like that Darth Vader was human, and I didn't like that he turned good, because I was, you know, 8, and I missed the whole point of the redemption thing. Now I think it's beautiful, and as a literary teacher, we talk about it almost weekly. That sequence especially, but so I put it on there just to give a nod to it. But as a kid, I probably would have been like, "What?" But I want Darth Vader to be bad. But I was a kid. All right, so this was amazing, and the two of you, I knew would have awesome things to say, and undoubtedly, people are going to want to hear more from you and of you. So, Scott, where can everybody find you online?
Well, I actually had the Assembly of Geeks podcast network kind of dissolve and break into their own shows in the recent weeks. And getting everything started has taken a little longer than expected, but if you type in assemblyofgeeks.com, you're now going to go to the Geek Supreme website. There's also the geeksupreme.com, take you to the same place. I'm working on comicbooknoob.com because that feed was already a standalone feed. So that show's going to continue. And the last episode of the first season of my fiction podcast, The Crimson Files, comes out this Friday. It is a action comedy superhero themed podcast, and you can find it at thecrimsonfiles.com. And I'm on Twitter at Mr. Scott Murray.
And the amount of work that Scott does. Scott was one of my original muses when I started Coffee with Kenobi, and I got a lot of tips from him. But the work you're doing, and then the fiction podcast, boy, that I don't know how much time you spend on that each week or what have you, but boy, is it fun to listen to.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, I really, really do. A lot of hours, days and hours. I mean, this whole thing, the development of this thing started in May, and there are times where I'll spend 3 hours on just a scene or two, getting everything just right and everything immersive enough. And then we had a pretty good sized cast for it too. But it all came together. I mean, it's just one of those projects that everything fell into place nicely, and I think we're all real happy with it.
Well, I'm especially happy with one of the guest stars you had. Boy, was he good.
I know, the guy that was interviewed by the press.
Yeah.
I remember that
so
guy.
much like me, I couldn't even tell you.
And I believe that he was impressed with the Crimson Crane, too. I just heard it in his voice that he was excited. I believed every word of it.
This is real. That's right.
That's right.
Well, Aaron also does some amazing work. And just in the short time I've gotten the good fortune to get to know you, I've learned a lot about podcasting, and it's been great. It's been great. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Oh, boy. I am not on Twitter hardly ever, but if you want to send me a message, you can do it at azaprod.com. That's AZAPROD.com. Or, well, Aza. It's not .com. That's my website. I'm on Twitter at azaprod. Then my website is azaprod.com. And if I could, I want to push my passion project.
Please.
I wrote a story a long time ago, and the quick story to preface this, I have been in radio for over 20 years, and when you write commercials, you have the 60-second window, this time limit, and you're writing about pantyhose and car tires and nothing that you really care about personally, but it's your job and you have to do it. And so I would get this urge to just create art for art's sake. And my mentor, who taught me so much about audio production, and he would grill me and make me better every single day I worked with him, Lee Norling, was a dear friend of mine. And I wrote this story with the intention of him to voice it. And he had passed away before we had an opportunity to do our last project together. And I ended up meeting Jim Hill through podcasting and Jim Hill Media and his network of shows. And Jim has such a warmth and friendliness about him that when you meet him, you instantly want to hug him and call him uncle. He's a teddy bear of a human. I just love him.
That's true.
And to know Jim is to love Jim, because he's just simply a wonderful, wonderful man. And he just reminded me of that uncle type feeling that I had of my good friend Lee Norling. So I had written the story, sat on a shelf for years thinking it would never, ever see the light of day. I begged Jim to read it for me, and finally got it produced after about 3 or 4 months of working on it. And it's called Goat. And it's very simply, I did not mean to write a fairy tale, but it's a fairy tale about a goat who wants to find a tin can, hopefully full of tomatoes. That's what the crux of the journey starts as. But because I have it fully produced with sound effects, Goat goes on an adventure, and the story is told through the eyes of Goat. So he doesn't know what's happening to him. And you as the listener have to piece together through the audio clues what the adventure Goat is about to go on actually is. And you as the audience realize there is great, great peril lying before Goat. And Goat has no idea, because he just wants a tin can full of tomatoes. And that's what the only thing that leads him forward is he wants a tin can full of tomatoes. And you as the audience know something bad is about to happen. And so it's a nearly modern day fairy tale. However, I will say this, ages like 15 and up, because there's like 4 potty words in it. I don't write strictly for kids I don't write strictly for children. I don't write strictly for adults. I write for me and what makes me happy. And then I deal with the consequences.
Let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, I will share with you some information about next week's show. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are the podcast you're looking for. This is.
Before we get to email, I want to thank our CWK sponsors, One Nation Coffee, Harry's Razors, and Mouse Fan Travel. Please support them the way they support our podcast. And remember to listen to new and archive shows of Coffee with Kenobi wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Stitcher, Spreaker, Overcast, Blog Talk Radio, Player FM, or our website, www.coffeewithkenobi.com. And if you listen to the show through iTunes, please leave us a review. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest, and Tumblr, and we'd love for you to check us out there. Also, be sure to listen to our CWK family of shows, including Legends Library, Rebels Reactions, Comics with Kenobi, and Lattes with Leia. Please leave a review for each of their shows as well, and be sure to subscribe to each of them individually, as they all have their own feeds now. That will do it for show number 144 of Coffee with Kenobi. A huge thank you to Scott Murray and Aaron Adams for joining me this week to discuss Return of the Jedi. I knew those guys were incredible Return of the Jedi fans, and boy, was it fun to converse with them. In addition to the places I just mentioned for Coffee with Kenobi, you can find me monthly on the podcast Looking at Lucasfilm, part of the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, as well as on Twitter at Mr. Zeher, MRZEHR, and you can find my writing on CWK's website, as well as StarWars.com, where I am an official blogger, and on IGN. Thanks again for joining us, and don't forget to check out www.patreon.com/coffeewithkenobi to help support this show, as well as get access to podcasts like CWK Pour Over, which, of course, you cannot hear anywhere else. There are also t-shirts, coffee mugs, and so much more. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Be sure to cover up if you're in the Midwest. It's going to be chilly. It's going to be fun. It's a big birthday weekend for me, so I will see you next week, and I will have so much more Star Wars conversation for you. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here.